God's truth abideth still. His kingdom is forever, as opposed to the devil's kingdom. So clearly we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness. Have no illusion, spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, what does this all mean? We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So all of these battles and wars and war of words and passions going on here that seems to come from lust of the flesh. No, it's not so much about that. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Now, principalities is interesting, against principalities. Now, you might look at that word principalities looking out of this world. So a power that is out of this world, principalities and powers that are out of this world, very well organised, much like here, very competitive with each other, very much all trying to climb up ladders of successes and all this, like we do here. Hierarchies, trying to get into higher positions of power, competing with each other. Well, this goes on out there as much as it goes on here. But the power structure here is nothing compared to the power structure out there. And so you have these principalities out there. Here we have various principles and cultures and religious persuasions or political persuasions, economic powers that rule here, and the war of words that rage within that spectrum. But go out of this world and you have these principalities out there. And here you're looking at kind of principles, let's say. Now take that word principalities and pull it apart and put in the word principles. Now, the devil, of course, has his principles. The devil also can be transformed as an angel of light. He might appear very much a principled man, because he's a devil. He's a cherub. He's the anointed cherub. He can appear as an angel of light. He can bring in even another Jesus, not the real Jesus. So you end up believing in a false and fake Jesus. So we wrestle now, and he has his said principles. And in this world we have our said principles. So there'd be one form of principle higher than another here, depending on your culture, your religion, your background, your country. All of this, they all have their various cultures and principles, and they're all under self-righteousness. Not God's righteousness, but people's own righteousness, and therefore under pride. But jump into the spirit world and you have a very self-righteous devil out there, so much so that he believes he is the true anointed one, as opposed to the anointed one, Jesus. And he has his principles, as do the devils. So principalities and powers, what they want to do is bring you under their principles, under their form of persuasion, under their governments even. And so they organise themselves out there, and they want to rule and reign here and take control and possession of man here, and set up a government here that comes under their form of principles. So people will come under their principality as coming from the spirit world, like a chain of command, as stemming out of the spirit world, stemming into this world. So we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not here that we should be looking. It's the spirit world we should be looking to. All of this here is largely coming from there. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, where does the spiritual wickedness in high places, what are we talking about here? Well, of course, you can stem this out into the spirit world. You have a hierarchy out there. And just like God's angels operate at the top, you have these archangels of God that go to the very throne of God and consult with God regarding matters here. And an angel is called a messenger. So an angel that comes with a message, and some of these the message is very much concerning affairs here to prophets and saints, comes from intelligence. They're not just coming in willy-nilly with some unthought out message. They've actually got this message from the top. They've come from the top, up there, standing in the presence of God, just like Gabriel, Gabriel, stand in the presence of God. In other words, Gabriel stood in the presence of God and he consults with God. God gives him the message. And these messages are very, very powerful in world affairs, in that the whole of history is changed as a result of many of these messages that come via these angels. So angels involved in world affairs like Gabriel are coming right from the top. Very much an archangel that stands in the presence of God. And Gabriel appears in the Old Testament and he comes in, talks to Daniel concerning world-changing events, concerning great nations, not only great nations, but great world empires that rise and fall. So Gabriel didn't come with some willy-nilly, crazy, unthought out, uncancelled and usual message. This would have come from consulting with God himself. I, Gabriel, he says, stand in the presence of God. So we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Now this happens on the other end of the spectrum. They have the devil and his angels consulting with Satan himself regarding matters here. And of course the devil has his hierarchy and structure out there, and angels that operate over the kingdoms here. So Jesus was taken to a high mountain, a very high mountain. You're looking at kind of like a high mountain in a spiritual sense there. And you have Satan at the top of this mountain symbolic of kingdoms. Now, these angels go right to the top and talk to God in this same sense on the top of the spiritual mountain, talking to God. Well, Jesus was taken up to a great and high mountain as opposed to God's mountain, God's kingdom, God at the top, angels at the top, archangels at the top, talking to God at the top, coming to man with messages from the top. So Jesus was taken up into this great and high mountain. We're looking at this spiritually. You can picture Jesus, the devil was allowed to tempt him, right? So the devil takes him up, kind of like on a spirit trip, so to speak, to the top of this great and high mountain. Jesus then kind of looks out. The mountain's so high you can see the whole world. Jesus then given a view from up there. Look down there. The devil would have said, at the whole world. Look at all the kingdoms and the power and the riches. All of this will I give to you, says Satan, if you will bow down and worship me. Of course, Jesus refused all of this, but other leaders in the world have accepted all of this. So many great leaders in the world have been taken to the top of this great mountain and shown various kingdoms in the world. No, the devil goes on to say he gives them to whomsoever he will. So every leader you see, it's because the devil's given the kingdom, the country, the persuasion and the power there, the hierarchy and the culture and all this, this king or president, prime minister, whichever, all given to them by Satan. I give it to whomsoever I will, says Satan. He says to Jesus, I'll give you all of it, every kingdom. So this is all very real. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. And of course, we have to fight all of this as Paul did. Paul always prayed from weakness. You realise this was very overwhelming, very real. Messenger of Satan sent above him, giving him all kinds of troubles, all kinds of persecutions, all kinds of hungers and what have you. This bringing him to weakness rather than from pride. And lest I should be exalted, he said, above measure for the abundance of revelations, there was given me a thorn in the flesh. The messenger of Satan sent to buffet me, to get him down, to bring him down. Lest I should be exalted above measure for the abundance of revelations given me. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice that it might depart from me. The Lord said to me, says Paul, my strength, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So in other words, he was saying, look, Paul, watch out for your pride. You can't help but be human. And you can be tempted here via this messenger of Satan sent to buffet you, be lifted up in pride. So I'm allowing you to be tempted here and be pushed around in this sense by this archdevil, no doubt, messenger of Satan, sent above him, bring him down, bring him into submission, get him to give up, and all this sort of thing. In order that you might pray instead of yield to your pride, in order that you might yield to the facts that when I am weak, then am I strong. For God's strength is made perfect in weakness. So in other words, if this is all getting you down, if the world's getting you down, you find there's so many troubles going on in your life and the devil's pushing you around and making everything seem like it all looks impossible and you feel so weak, then remember what St. Paul said. When I am weak, then am I strong. For God's strength is made perfect in weakness. So praise Jesus.